Hello, my friends, and welcome to another devotional connection. I read something a few weeks ago that I shared with my second church this past weekend. It's a small lesson from one story, but can be shared across the board as we look for what to do about the problems society is presenting on a daily basis. The story is the classic David and Goliath, but it is how the story starts that I want to focus on. 1 Samuel 17 tells the story of the Philistines and their giant champion Goliath rising to war against Israel and blaspheming against the Most High. King Saul of Israel had gathered his men to war, of which some of David's older brothers went to do battle. The giant frightened the men of Israel and had spent 40 days daring Israel to send a man out to challenge him and saying egregious words against God. Verse 17 picks up the story. One day Jesse said to his son David, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers, and hurry to their camp. Take also these 10 portions of cheese to the commander of their unit. Check on the welfare of your brothers and bring back an assurance from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in Elah, fighting against the Philistines." So David got up early in the morning, left the flock with the keeper, loaded up, and set out as Jesse had instructed him. He reached the camp, and as the army was marching out to its position and shouting the battle cry, and Israel and the Philistines arrayed in formation against each other. Then David left his supplies in the care of the quartermaster and ran to the battle line. When he arrived, he asked his brothers how they were doing. And as he was speaking with them, suddenly the champion named Goliath, the Philistine from Gath, came forward from the Philistines and shouted his usual words, which David also heard. Now you know the rest of the story, but here's something amazing that I never realized and thought was a part of my story. David never set out to kill giants that morning. He didn't wake up with some great plan to go to war and go after battles that weren't his to fight. What he did was go out and do the will of his father, which was to serve and check on his brothers. It just so happened that in the process of doing his father's will, a giant got in the way and had to be destroyed. There was no way David could return to his father and tell him that he left his brothers in terrible peril. There is no way that that giant wasn't going to fall after all that God had taken David through as a shepherd. There was no way any giant could defy the God of Israel. This giant had the unfortunate circumstances of meeting a believer of God who was on a mission to serve and got in the way. When Jesus returned Peter to his position, both as a disciple and leader, 3 times he told the disciple to feed his sheep. In essence, I'm commanding you to serve. I didn't ask you to fight every battle, conquer every calamity, run down every sinner. I asked you to serve. If giants get in your way in the process, they will fall just the same. Count on it, but don't go looking for trouble. Trouble will find you all by itself. Instead, look to serve as our Father has commanded, and watch Him conquer every giant that dares rise against you, doing the will of Him who sent you. Have a great day, guys.